You know, at some point during this conversation, we're going to run out of time, and I know we're going to say to ourselves, gee, we should have scheduled more time for this, but who makes the decision about whether something goes in the newspaper? Is it the editor? Or
in our publication, yes. I would say it is the editor, but I don't think it's a sole decision. I think that in our case, there's lots of things that go into it. I mean, yes, I would make the final decision, but I'm taking opinions of everybody there in that newsroom because maybe I didn't do the story, maybe somebody else wrote the story. And so I'm taking, that reporter's opinion and trying to balance it, always making sure that the story is, that it's fair and that it's balanced and that it's, good news that our readers want to know.
How about you, Ed, from that standpoint? Who makes that decision?
The editors decide where it's going to go, but if your newspaper's working right, you're not going to waste a lot of energy writing stories that aren't going to go in the paper.
Exactly.
So the reporters
So you'd be looking for a job someplace if you did.
Right. If every day you came back and you said, I got this story, and they say, no, we don't want it,
right.
You wouldn't be employed very long. So you come up with an idea, you talk about it with your editors or the people directly above you in the chain of command, and then ultimately they're going to look at the finished product and decide how much play it deserves and where it deserves to be in the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Right, you don't just write stories just hoping that they're going to get in. That's very true.
Well, let me ask you a question about, I'm always fascinated with the headlines. And frequently you got to read past the headlines to really find out what the story says, because if you don't read past the headline, then you come away with an entirely different opinion about what was in the newspaper. Who writes the headlines in your publication? In our publication,
sometimes it can be the reporter because he's the one that actually wrote the story. Sometimes it can be the person putting the page together. We were talking earlier how it's a real skill. Not everybody can write a good headline. You have to be able to read that story very quickly and come up with something that's correct. And like you said, sometimes they're misleading. They're not always the best ones. So it's an art. It's a real art.
Same is true in
our case. It's almost always the copy editor. They're the third line of defense in the paper, the third line in progression of a story. But those decisions are made after they've decided how the paper is going to be shaped. They're going to decide what the lead story is, where the art is, and all of those things. All of those things happen after I'm gone from the paper. So it's impossible for me to decide what the headline should be, because I don't know if it needs to be 3 lines or 2 lines or 1 line.
Or if it's the top of the page.
Top of the page, a hammerhead. We don't make those decisions.
Does the copy editor change the story? I mean, could you write it one way and have the copy editor change the story?
In our case, no. They don't. They would write the headline, and then the editor would go over it and make sure it's correct. But so no, in our case, they would not be changing copy.
Mm-hmm.
To a very small extent, they can make some fixes, but. The normal progression is you write a story, then you sit down with your editor, the person who's directly above you, and you'll have a conversation about what changes need to be made. And once that's done, it's assumed that everything else is going to be cosmetic. And if they needed to change a lead or make significant changes, they would call you at home and you would okay the changes. And hopefully that's how things work. Occasionally, something happens and they think they're fixing something and they'll insert an error or change something. But for the most part, it's largely cosmetic, largely fact-checking, and copy editors probably hate me for saying this, but they do solve a lot lot of problems
they do a great job.
We don't see sometimes.
Just as I predicted, this has gone much too quickly. And hopefully you'll agree to come back again where we can spend maybe an hour just talking about the newspaper business, because I'm fascinated.
There's a lot to talk about.
Well, there is a lot to talk about, and with your experience, I apologize to you from the standpoint that this certainly went much faster than I had anticipated. We'll be right back. We have left the Capitol and we have driven to the Press Tribune's publishing place in Roseville, and Susan is about to tell us about the press room.
Well, this is where it all happens for the Roseville and Granite Bay newspapers. I have a staff of 2 reporters and 2 page designers and a half-time photographer, and they pretty much write all the stories, put all the stories on the page, and take the pictures.
How many times do you publish a week?
We publish on Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Wednesdays and Saturdays. What's the deadline, by the way?
Gosh.
If we're going to be in the paper on Wednesday, When do you have to have it by Tuesday?
Before 3 o'clock.
Before 3 o'clock. So if it doesn't get in at 3 o'clock, then it just doesn't get in.
Well, it doesn't get in the print version, but it gets on the internet.
And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But how long has the Press Tribune been printing a newspaper in the Roseville area?
More than 100 years.
100 years.
Yeah, I think about 105. In fact, Roseville celebrates its 100th birthday, 2009.
2009.
Yeah,
and
big celebrations.
And you all have been publishing a paper for more than 100 years. Was there any
Yes.
time that it was a daily?
Yes, it was. And then it was 5 days a week. And now we're unfortunately only 2 days a week.
2 days a week.
Yes.
Tell us about the aspect of almost every newspaper, and I presume that you have as well. You know, they used to be a little bit wider, and now they are just. How did you make that?
They are just a little bit slimmer.
How did you make that decision?
Well, it saves on newsprint, so you're not using as much newsprint because in this day we have to save where we can. And plus, it's a little bit easier for people to read. You know, you can open it up and it's not like this, it's just a little bit more manageable. So we decided to go with that about a year ago. So it's a little bit thinner.
Now, with the reporters that you have here and printing twice, how many stories will they write?
Oh, gosh.
How many stories? Stories. How many print stories will they write? Or,
I would
or is
say-
everything eligible for print, and then that which is not printed goes into the internet, or vice
Yes,
versa?
we try and put everything on the internet, and we take the best of what's on that internet and put it in print. But each reporter's probably doing 3 to 6 stories every week, every edition.
3 to
every
6
edition.
stories.
And that's not counting the magazines and all the other things that we do here.
When these reporters write, do they leave the premise frequently?
Yes, a lot of times they do, because I think you can get a better story. You know, if you're talking with your subject and you can see where they are in their surroundings,
Right.
they get a better story.
And you get lots of things over the transom, people saying, you know, you need to investigate this,
Oh
or
yes,
you need
we
to
get
take.
calls all the time.
All the time.
Very interesting calls.
How
Yes.
would a call like that go?
Well, you know, sometimes it'll come. A lot of times it comes into me, and
Yes.
so I'll try and figure out: is it worth a story, or is it worth maybe just a little calendar item, or is it worth a letter to the editor? Just kind of depends on what somebody's asking.
So the first thing you check in the morning is your voicemail to see.
Yes, and there's always messages. It's always blinking, and then I check my internet.
Have you? Are you always surprised that what people will say when they don't have to give you their name?
Yes, in fact, a lot of them want me to do stories without their name,
Without their
and,
name.
and that's really hard to do. We don't like to do that.
Right. One of the things that I have noticed in our correspondence is where people don't have to give their name, they're frequently very
Yeah.
vitriolic
Yes.
about a
Yes.
particular subject or
Yes.
an individual, but they're not willing to give their name.
That's why our letters to the editor always have to have a first and last name, or we don't print them.
Do you verify those?
Not in the sense of looking up when they send the letter in, their address and their phone number and everything is all on there. No, we don't always verify, but sometimes we do.
You rewrite the letters to the editor?
No, but I edit them if the grammar is incorrect, or you know, I have to make sure the information is correct. They can't, you know, say something, defame somebody's character or something like that.
Right. Now tell us very quickly about this area that's behind us now with the reporters. How many did you say you have?
We have 2 reporters,
You have 2 reporters.
and so they're working at their computers, doing their stories.
And that which doesn't go in the print goes to the.
Goes on our website 24/7.
And how has that changed? You know, we talked about that a little bit before, but how's
Yeah.
that? You know, even on a monthly basis, how does that change your business?
Oh, big time. Because now, even though we're only twice a week, we can actually be 24/7 because we can put it on that website. The reporters know how to upload stories from home. If something happened at home that they needed to get to, they can do that. So if people are constantly checking our website, they will be hopefully pretty well informed about what's going on in Roseville and Granite Bay.